Survivors of comas, what was it like? I got in a car accident in 2016. No head trauma, thank God, but I was in and out of consciousness for about a week. I have 3 memories and flashes of asking for water about 1 trillion times. The 3 memories were: 1. My friend Rosa coming to see me. I think I woke up for like a minute and went back to oblivion. 2. Waking up and having a tingling feeling. I fractured 4 or 5 vertebrae and had a burst fracture on my L4 in my right leg. Notifying my mom or dad, honestly don't remember, who then got a doctor who promptly told everyone to leave, then I was back out again. 3. Itching to my parents about one specific nurse who I blamed for not letting me have water in my haze of drugs. Edit. 4. I remember signing some paperwork before going into the first spinal surgery, release forms and a DNR. A motorcycle accident left me in a medically induced coma for about 2 weeks. I had weird dreams. I didn't know what had happened to me until I was woken up. I didn't know time had passed. I still remember the dreams. I was in a medically induced coma for 3 weeks. All I remember is what it's like when they start pulling you out. I was having very vivid and strange dreams mixed with reality. Then one day I was able to recognize it was now September, but I remembered entering the hospital in August. I was put into a medically induced coma for a week after I got my it rocked in a crash. It sucked balls. 1. I could hear what was going on, but had 0 ways to communicate. 2. The hallucinations nightmares was really ducked, but that's to expected from anyone who goes into a coma due to a traumatic event. And 3. I couldn't tell what was real and what was a dream for a very long time, and still have moments where I have loud and severe auditory hallucinations that convince me I'm back in my non-consensual nap time. Also, something that isn't well known is, after an extended period of strong as it meds and not moving, besides when the nurses roll you like a Cali roll, your muscles forget how to work. It took me about a month of rehab to get enough strength to lift a large cup of water, but it was absolutely necessary, and although it was scary as it, I survived my less than 10% survival chance thanks to, and the ducking amazing, strong, and caring nurses and specialists. I was able to return to my babies, and my future husband. Still, 0/10 would not recommend. Edit. Thank you kind and awesome people for the awards. Edit 2 holy crap, this blew up. I'm sorry for the 0 response for the last 12 hours, but I will get to you guys. I hope you guys have an awesome and beautiful day. Edit 3 holy at someone gave me gold. Thank you kind and awesome person, you rock. In a coma for 42 days. I don't remember a thing. I was out for 2.5 days from an unintentional overdose, aka why the pharmacy always asks if you have any questions about that pill nowadays. I have no memory for about a day after waking up, but my family said I had some pretty rough things to say after my eyes opened. 0/10 would not recommend. Ducking weird. I was out for 9 days. Coma dreams are intense. Coming back from it was super strange too. A lot of questioning reality. My sister was in a coma for over a month from a car accident. She was asleep in the back seat on a road trip and her friend flipped the car on the freeway, trying to avoid something on the road by swerving, but in a panic she hit the gas instead of the brake. She had a bruise on her brain which was kinda like her being mentally handicapped, but each day she got better. Now she's completely recovered and back to normal. When she woke up she told us she had a dream where some mystery guy shot her and that's what she thought happened, with no recollection of the car accident. Not one, but my cousin was in one for a month. He woke up, looked around and began to scream like a lunatic, and saying someone's name. However, after that day of waking up he didn't remember a single thing. The name he was screaming was Anna, and no one there knew who Anna was. The doctors believe it was a deep coma dream. He spent 3 weeks after that shaking. He had a lot of issues walking properly and forming more than 2 sentences without stuttering like crazy. I'm very close with him, and when I ask him about Anna, his mood changes drastically and all he says is I don't wanna talk about it. Pursuing it further would make him break down crying or make him scream at you. He's a lot better now, other than when he's asked who Anna was. Edit. Before people ask, his coma was the result of a car accident. My cousin was hit by a car when he was in his early teens and was in a coma for about 6 weeks. He's in his late 20s now. He lives in a group home, has the mental capacity of a child, is prone to, often violent, fits of rage and has very little impulse control. He cannot work a normal job. He will never be able to live alone. He cannot live at home because of his violent rages, not his fault, and will never have a normal life. Comas aren't like the movies. Brain damage is a itch. The worst thing. Emo is the atrophy that happens while you're not moving. I was in a coma for a month and had to build my muscles up to be able to walk and climb steps again. I think I made it from my door to the next one the first time they got me out of bed. And I cried because of the mixture of physical and mental pain. The first time I tried to climb a flight of stairs I just went at it like normal and was exhausted before coming close to the top. The rehab person had to explain to me that for now it was getting both feet on the step before going for the next one, like how old people climb stairs. It ended up taking over a year before my body was anywhere close to normal. I also had this skin peeling on my hands and feet shortly after I woke up. I fell into a coma after I got very drunk, fell over, cracked my head and had a bleed on my brain, had the last rites said as well. I was out for about 21 hours or so. I remember nothing of the coma, just woke up with no recollection of what happened, was a mixture of very confused, disorientated and had a standard itty hangover. I was about 7 when it happened. I was playing around on a swing and apparently fell over and hit my head, also swallowed my tongue in the process. Fortunately people around were quick to react. Somebody reached down my throat and took out my tongue and called an ambulance. I don't really remember it all that. I just remember waking up at the hospital the next day. My mother was standing next to me and as I woke up she started asking me questions like about what my name was or what her name was. I remember being really confused. I was like, "Mum, what sort of silly question is that?" Turns out, I'd woken up at some point in the ambulance and had no idea who my mum and dad were, as they were in the ambulance with me. Definitely not a fun experience. But the worst part was that the doctors said I couldn't eat chocolate for like a month after that. I woke up in the hospital 3 days after an unintentional overdose of opiates and benzos. I remember projectile vomiting in my apartment, then waking up 3 days later with my girlfriend by my side. She showed up to find me unresponsive and barely breathing on my couch. As far as the coma itself goes, it was basically like falling asleep and waking up 3 days later. It was initially very confusing. I unfortunately didn't stop using drugs for another year and a half. Edit. Just a clarification, I woke up in the hospital with my girlfriend by my side. I don't remember the coma itself. I was conscious and then I woke up with my mom sitting next to me. Nothing in between. When I woke up, I assumed I was at home. Why would my mom be sitting next to my bed? Wait, this isn't my bed. Wait, is this a hospital room? When did I get to the hospital? Why am I in a hospital? Why am I in pain? I was pretty much panicking here. Eventually, everything was explained to me and I calmed down. I had rolled my truck and hit my head 9 days prior. So, coma itself was ?10. Waking up after was pi/10. Would not recommend. How do I know I'm not in one right now? And yeah, my brain messing with me? I was out about 13 days. Don't recall too much, but there were dreams that had familiar faces and places but not structured like an event so much. However, when I awoke, the most difficulty I had to deal with was finding a way to resolve the lost time. I was in a medically induced coma for a week or two, back in 2008. After going through a 22-hour surgery to remove the tumor from my abdominal area, I ended up spending about 3 months in the surgical ICU recovering from that, before being sent upstairs for 3 more months in the hospital receiving chemotherapy. I still have PTSD today from my time in the ICU. A big part of it was something called ICU delirium. Basically, it's when the bright, always on, lights, constant beeps and odd combinations of medicines mess with your systems and, basically, make you temporarily crazy. I still remember the hallucinations I had there more vividly than dreams I had this week. Ugh. It was absolutely beautiful. Well, the near-death experience. Mine was only like 3 days. It was pretty surreal coming back and then immediately very depressing after experiencing that peacefulness. Messed me up really bad for at least a year and still not who I was anymore. I completely misread this and was wondering what the duck did the Comas do. I was in a coma for 2 weeks and my family was told to start making arrangements. My wife and my 3 boys, all adults, were with me around the clock. I don't remember anything at all, but later, much later, when I made it through and was out of the hospital, I didn't feel like listening to music, especially the Beatles or Zeppelin as well as some other which are my favorites, and I have playlists for all my different moods. It made me depressed and angry. We all had gotten together and I was told that. It now I crying. My family played these playlists non-stop. The thing is, I always have some music on, and as far back as I can remember into my youth, I've had something always playing, or at concert, searching for new music. I'm now back, 2 years later, to listening to most of my favorites but not with the same excitement. Never been in a coma personally, but my BFF was in one for 3 months after a motorcycle accident and he told me some weird stuff, had some crazy trauma from it. 1. Endless hallways in a hospital where he was running away from some unidentified shadowy thing. 2. Ran into a room full of crazy surgical instruments and a mad scientist who strapped him down to a bed to experiment on him. He later speculated that it may have been influenced by the straps on the bed he was laying on in real life. 3. Gargoyles. At least that's what he called them. The little grey ones wanted to hurt him but the big reddish brown ones scared them off. Apparently it wasn't safe either, but it ignored him rather than killed him. 4. He would often call me in the middle of the night. I got off work around 2 AM and could never sleep right after work, and have me come over to sit with him. At these times his mood could range from normal to bouncing off the walls to crying in terror. One of these times was not long after he had brought a new puppy home. He called me over because he was afraid to be alone with it. Apparently it reminded him of the red gargoyle. I don't know if comas caused PTSD, but I would fully believe that he had it. Had cancer as a kid. One night I had a fever of 105 plus, so obviously had to head to the hospital. I remember waking up and seeing my mom, and I had met up with my dad at a gas station. He works nights and his office was on the way. Then I remember going into the hospital and getting an IV. Then waking up hella confused and attached to a bunch of weird machines 3 days later. Ate some food. Knocked out again for 4 more days. Apparently I had some virus causing fluid around my brain. Totally could have died. And my brain's reaction was to go unconscious. When I woke up the last time I somehow felt pretty normal. Got the IV taken out. And went home later that day. It felt like almost no time passed. Super weird. It was bizarre. Last thing I remember was the respiratory tech came into my general floor hospital room to give me a treatment. Next thing I know she is calling and the floor nurses say we have to get her to ICU now. Someone said we need doctor's orders and the tech said I don't care, we are going now. 7 days later the breathing tube is removed and I start coming to reality. The first day I was so out of it I thought Oprah had found a cure for cancer. I also for some reason decided to attack a nurse, tried to run and promptly fell face first into a counter. I broke my nose. The weeks following were very strange. I developed a fear of falling asleep and had mild hallucinations. All in all 0/10 recommend. Obligatory. Never been in a coma myself, but I am a nurse who've worked ICU. I must say it really differs from person to person. Most people told me they don't remember a lot. Maybe some dreams or the last few seconds before the accident surgery. But I had a few patients who actually heard things happening in the ICU around them. Like someone could tell me quite personal details about one of the other nurses. Stuff she talked about with co-workers while caring for the patient. Or they remember the motion of being turned to different sides. Someone I met later told me she cannot stand smelling the body lotion scent we use there. Like a deep sleep. My parents brought me to HTE hospital with high fever. The doctor gave penicillin, which it turns out I'm allergic to. I woke up next day with no memories of the night. I woke up in the hospital room, was confused for a few minutes. I met a guy who was in an accident and spent 3 months in a coma. He said he spent 5 years in his mind, got his it together and got married. Then he woke up a paraplegic. My father survived recently a cardiac arrest. He was in a coma for almost a week. When he was strong enough to talk, we asked him what does he remember. He said he remembers being wheeled constantly to different parts of the hospital, endless doors, constantly being wheeled in. Most likely it's a recurring scene of him in the ER as docs were trying to revive him. He was completely out for around 3-4 days and would wake up sporadically for the remainder of the week until he was finally released from ICU. We asked him if he saw any door or white light, tunnel stuff. He said nope, just doctors bustling around him. I have a similar story, but it wasn't a coma. I was put under for removal of my wisdom teeth a few years back. My dream seemed like an entire year where the world was ending and all of my family was dying around me. Scavenging for food, hunting animals, sneaking through destroyed, car-littered streets. Finally made a safe house and saved a dog that I kept for a few months. The house was starting to get broken into when I woke up. I was only out for 34 minutes. I remember waking up and seeing my mom who drove me there, and just started bawling. Happy she was still alive. The ride back home was so surreal. I was out for 10 days after being diagnosed with type 1 diabetes 15 years ago. No memory of the coma, but I had a series of something between hallucinations and wild dreams during waking, which were oddly specific, including being the writer of a novel called Salt and Cement about a woman buried in a large open cement shaft on a salt moving processing yard, which I played partially within the dream in a mild moment of inception. Asked my friend, who was in an induced coma for 2 weeks after a car accident. His response, how the duck should I know? I was in a coma. I'm not sure what I expected. Horrible. When I woke up, 2 weeks after the coma, I could not remember anything. I forgot who my parents were and everything. I got a coma for freaking tripping over a rock and hitting my head on concrete. Like what? It felt horrible when I woke up. My head was all dizzy and my eyesight was barely working till a couple blinks. Now I never to go outside and run across my neighbor's driveway. This actually raises an interesting philosophical question. Namely, what is time to the dead in dreaming? You hear many stories of dreaming or comatose people dreaming up 10 or 20 years of their lives without any knowledge of the real world and feeling every day go by despite every single one of them taking place within a short fraction of REM sleep in the middle of the night. The thing with dreaming though is that you wake up. There must be a break in that cycle. To a dying man, those last few moments before your brain shuts off and you cease to be a living human being could last an eternity. IDK. Just a thought. Was out for 48 hours. I don't remember anything. It was like a time warp where I closed my eyes and then opened them and 2 days passed. There's an old Reddit post about a guy who was in college and was walking and tripped on a curb or something and hit his head. He was in a coma for a very short amount of time. Like 10 minutes or a day. But in that time he basically lived out this reality where he met a wife and had a child. Neither of which existed in real life. He experienced those events in what felt to him real time. One day, in this reality, he was sitting in his chair and noticed something odd about the lamp. He couldn't help but just stare at the lamp for hours and then days, which had his wife extremely worried. Eventually, after staring at the lamp for long enough, he woke up from his coma. He had to mourn the loss of his wife and young child who were, to him, incredibly real and who he had known for what felt like years. It was a fantastic and sad story. Edit. It was kinda like he played a demo version of Roy. Not me, but my cousin. Went into a diabetic coma in high school in his sleep, while having a nightmare. He was out 2 weeks. Said the entire time was a nightmare. When he woke up, he hallucinated the nurse checking on him to be stapling his fingers together. So he slapped her and screamed, "Who the duck are you?" Then the nurse walked out of the room and said he's awake. Attempted suicide via overdose of antidepressant in my teens. It was weird because I started hearing voices and then I blacked out. Came back into consciousness and I was throwing up and hallucinating. I hallucinated that I threw up a bar of soap. Blacked out again, then I was being asked by the medics what I took. Blacked out a final time and woke up a week later. Trying to rip the ventilator tubes out of my throat. They sedated me and then I woke up groggy. No dreams. Nothing. Kinda makes me believe that once you die there is nothing but loss of consciousness. My biggest fear is that I'm still in a coma. And this is my dream. A friend of mine has had 2 comas. He was in a small plane when it crashed and he went out for a smoke and disappeared. Turned out we was run over by a motorcycle avoiding a car. I remember this really well because he was working for a client of mine. He was working late along. When his client came into the space, all of his stuff was on the desk. He was just gone. They called me out of the blue and asked if I knew where he was. He was in intensive care for 2 weeks. When he tells me of his experiences, he says he was flying through the sky over mountains, then past our planets and our solar system. He always tells me he can't wait to leave his bone cage and go back to traveling through the galaxy. It was the most beautiful experience he ever had. As a kid, I liked to climb things. We were in Key West on some random vacation when I was climbing the underside of our boat like a rock wall climber. I feel almost at the pinnacle of the tip of the boat. When my head hit the rocks, my vision turned into a static screen and my body was paralyzed. I was able to hear and was aware of what was going on, but my body wasn't responding to anything. I heard the crunch of rocks as my brother ran up and picked me up. The scream of my mom as the truck speeded toward the hospital. At that point the mind is fuzzy. I awoke with Mickey, Donald, and Goofy hand puppets. They released me back with the family and I spent the rest of the vacation on a fold-out lawn chair with wires glued to my chest and head. Half my childhood permanently disappeared. Can't remember anything. I dreamed all my nurses were lesbian biker chicks who were trying to abuse me. Later on I realized they were just trying to get a catheter in me. By the way, I have nothing against lesbians or biker chicks. Just had a diseased brain at the time. Big napper. No dreams. Only nap. I don't know how long I was asleep for. I do remember I was getting a blood transfusion when I woke up. I was so ducking excited about it for some reason. I vividly remember beaming ear to ear at the nurse, softly cooing like a baby to her. It's a blood party. I'm so happy I was invited. Obligatory not me, but my mom was in a coma for 6 months during my 9th grade year. She described it as being in hardcore dream-like state. Worst year of my life. Luckily I have never been in one. My younger brother has when he was like 3 years old. The only thing he remembers is the time before he came back. Kind of creepy. Anyhow, I was just watching videos about that the other day on YouTube. Some people that last years in a coma say they remember people who were there being part of their life all those years. They even said they held a job, had a normal life, and when they wake up, they mourn the loss of those people because everything seemed so real. I wonder if people just go to another dimension while in a coma. It's creepy but fascinating at the same time. Disorienting. I was out for 2 days when I was 11 years old. A literal diabetic coma. It's how I was diagnosed. I have flashes of being surrounded by a flurry of nurses and doctors and then nothing. I woke up in the ICU. Confused. I remember not being surprised when I heard the diagnosis. It felt I already knew somehow. I thought that was it until I spoke with my mom recently. I mentioned the boy in the ICU bed across from me. How vividly I remember his constant screaming that first day, soon replaced by very poignant silence. My mom said she recalled, but I shouldn't. He was there when I first entered the ICU but was gone long before I came to after the second day. To be fair though, I had started hallucinating shortly before slipping into the coma. So maybe I just dreamed it. The crazy part though is I can physically see him in my memory and the description matches what mom remembered. Brains are weird. IDK. I'll let you know when I finally wake up.